I still remember that day, as if it had just happened. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that's only broken by the occasional creak of old wooden floors. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, and I sat in my favorite chair by the window. My knitting needles clicked together rhythmically, a small comfort in what should have been a peaceful time in my life. I'd always thought that when Gary passed, it would be hard, yes, but that I would find solace in my family, in Marissa, especially. She was my only daughter, the one I had always trusted more than anyone else. When Gary's heart failed, it was Marissa who insisted I move in with her and Craig. Her big house seemed like the perfect place to spend my golden years. A fresh start after years of marriage and raising a family of my own. But that was before things turned sour. At first, things were fine. Marissa and Craig seemed happy to have me there. I kept to myself, tried to not be a burden. I didn't want to intrude. I knew they were busy with their own lives. Craig was working long hours at his law firm, and Marissa was busy with her job in marketing. But I'd do little things around the house to help bake cookies, fold laundry, wash dishes. Small gestures, things that were second nature to me. Things I thought might make me a welcome guest. But over the last few months, I'd noticed a change. The smiles became fewer, the eye contact more strained. Craig became distant, and Marissa stopped talking to me like she used to. There was always something else going on, some excuse for why she couldn't spend time with me. She'd stop by my room briefly, say something like, "How are you, Mom? Hope everything's okay." But I could tell something was off. I knew there was something more, and yet, I kept pushing it down. I told myself it was just my imagination, that things would go back to normal, but deep down, I had this nagging feeling. And then came that evening, the one that would change everything. It started like any other evening. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in front of me, when I heard Marissa and Craig arguing in the living room. Their voices were raised, no longer the playful banter they'd shared when I first moved in, but sharp, urgent, as if a line had been crossed. I couldn't make out the words at first, but I heard my name mentioned, and that was all I needed to know. My heart dropped. The conversation was a blur of muffled voices, but I could hear enough to catch the tone. Marissa's voice was cold, clipped. "I can't keep doing this, Craig. She's here all the time. I don't know how much longer I can stand it." I froze. That was it, the confirmation I'd been avoiding. They were talking about me. I didn't know what had changed, but I could feel it in the air. Something was very wrong. Craig's voice followed, more tired than angry. "I know, Marissa, but we've talked about this. She's your mother. We can't just kick her out. But, God, I can't keep pretending it's okay." I sat there, holding my breath, each word like a hammer to my chest. Kick me out. Was that what they were planning? After everything, after I had given my whole life to them, to this family, was I really just going to be cast aside so easily? I knew I had to act. Slowly, I stood up from the table, my knees shaking slightly. I wasn't sure if it was fear, anger, or a mix of both. I needed to face them, needed to hear the words for myself. I walked down the hallway to the living room, my heart pounding with every step. When I entered the room, both of them stopped talking. Marissa was sitting on the couch, her arms crossed, her face hard. Craig was standing by the window, looking out at the darkening yard. The moment I walked in, the silence was deafening. I could feel the weight of their unspoken thoughts hanging in the air. "Mom," Marissa said, her voice softer now, but I could hear the hesitation. "We need to talk." I nodded, trying to steady myself. "What is it, Marissa?" There was a long pause before she spoke again, and when she did, her words hit me like a slap. "Mom, it's time for you to go." The room seemed to close in around me. I couldn't breathe for a moment. "What?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "Go. What do you mean, go?" She shifted uncomfortably on the couch, avoiding my eyes. "We love you, Mom, but it's just, it's too much. You've been here for too long, and Craig and I need some space. We can't keep doing this. You need to leave." I felt the ground beneath me shift. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything I had done for her. All those years, the sacrifices I made, the love I gave her. And now she was telling me to leave. "No, Marissa," I said, my voice growing steadier, more resolute. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home too. I raised you. I supported you. I have nowhere else to go." Craig finally turned around, his face cold. "Elsie, it's not personal. It's just, it's been too much. You need to understand this. It's for the best." "For the best," I repeated, my voice rising now. "For the best, Craig. For whose best? Certainly not mine. I've spent my life taking care of this family, and now, You're asking me to leave like I don't even matter." The words left me before I could stop them, and I felt them burn as they left my lips. I wanted to shout, to scream, but I knew that would make it worse. Instead, I stood there, staring at them, waiting for something to change. But nothing did. Marissa's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. She just looked at me as if I were a stranger. I turned and walked out of the room. My body felt numb, but my mind was racing. As I reached the hallway, I heard Craig's voice behind me. "Mom, please understand. It's just, we need our space." I didn't turn around. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. This was it. They had crossed the line, and now, I would cross mine. I wasn't going to stand by and let them take everything from me. Not this time. I had been given a gift in the form of their rejection, a chance to rebuild, to reclaim my dignity, and maybe just maybe to show them what it truly meant to betray someone who loved them. I would leave, but only on my terms, and I would make sure they never forgot the price of what they had done. The next few days were a blur of emotion and action. The sting of Marissa's words still lingered like a deep, raw wound, and every time I closed my eyes, I could see her face, the face of the daughter I raised, the daughter I loved, looking at me with nothing but cold indifference. I couldn't understand it. All those years, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the love I poured into her life, and this was how she repaid me. How they both did. I spent the first night in the guest room, though I knew I wouldn't be staying there much longer. I hadn't even unpacked my bags when I arrived. What was the point? I had always thought I would be there for the long haul, but that plan had been dashed in an instant. The house I once considered home now felt like a cage. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, and yet, there was a calmness that began to settle in my chest as I realized something. They had underestimated me. I'd spent the whole of my life dealing with challenges, both big and small. Losing Gary, raising Marissa on my own after he passed, and even dealing with my own insecurities as an older woman. These were all things I'd overcome. And now, they were giving me the chance to prove that I wasn't someone to be cast aside. So I wasn't some helpless old woman who would curl up in a corner and disappear. I had more strength left in me than they could ever imagine. The first thing I did was pack my things. I had very little, just a few clothes and the sentimental items I'd held onto for years. I couldn't stay at Marissa's house, but I didn't need to go far. I had a small cottage on the outskirts of town. A place I'd bought with my own savings years ago, when Gary was still alive. We'd always intended to retire there, away from the noise of the city. But after his death, I let it fall into disrepair. I'd never gotten around to fixing it up, and for a time, I didn't think I would. But now, it felt like a lifeline. The next morning, I drove to the cottage. It was exactly how I remembered it. Small, cozy, and surrounded by the overgrown greenery of the Kentucky woods. The air smelled fresh, and the chirping of the birds outside brought a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in days. For the first time since Marissa's cruel words, I felt like I could breathe again. This place, this cottage, was mine. It was always going to be mine. But I wasn't here just to retreat. I wasn't here to lick my wounds and go quietly into the night. No. I was here because this was where I could start over. It was where I could plan, where I could figure out how to make them pay for what they'd done to me. As I unpacked my things in the small bedroom, I thought about everything I had given up in the name of family. Gary's death had left a void in my life, and Marissa had been my anchor. I had always believed that family was everything, that it was the one thing you could count on when everything else fell apart. But now, I was beginning to see that maybe that wasn't true. Maybe family wasn't about blood. Maybe it was about respect. And right now, I had none from the people I'd loved the most. I sat down at the kitchen table and made a list. I always did this when I needed to focus. Writing things down helped me think clearly. The first item on the list: get to the truth. Marissa and Craig hadn't just kicked me out because I was a burden. There had to be something more to this. Some reason why they would do something so heartless. Something that would tear apart the very fabric of our family. I needed to know what had changed. What was going on behind closed doors? I'd always known Craig wasn't the most forthcoming man. He had a way of avoiding difficult conversations, of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. And Marissa, my sweet Marissa, had always been a bit of a people pleaser. She'd do anything to avoid conflict, to make others happy even if it meant hurting herself in the process. But something was different now. Something had snapped, and I needed to find out what it was. The second item on my list: get my finances in order. I had money saved up enough to live comfortably, but not enough to get by without working. I hadn't touched my savings in years, and it felt strange to dip into it now. But this was different. I wasn't going to let them push me out without a fight. I needed to find a way to get back on my feet and make sure that when the time came, I wouldn't have to rely on anyone, especially not Marissa or Craig. But as I sat there, thinking of the steps I needed to take, one thing became abundantly clear. Revenge wasn't going to be about loud confrontations or grand gestures. It was going to be quiet, subtle, methodical. I wasn't going to throw myself into the fire, like I had when I was younger. I'd learned to play the long game, and this was a game I was determined to win. The third item on my list was a bit more complicated: reconnect with old friends. Over the years, I had lost touch with a lot of people, old neighbors, former coworkers, even distant relatives. But now, as I sat in the solitude of my little cottage, I realized how important those connections were. There were people out there who still remembered me, who still respected me. I needed to tap into that network. I needed allies. And I wasn't going to ask for their help directly. No, I would let them come to me. I would be strategic, and when the time came, they would be there whether they realized it or not. I spent the next few days settling into the cottage, making it more livable. I repaired the broken windows, fixed the leaky roof, and cleaned out the dust and cobwebs. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and with each passing day, I could feel my strength returning, but it wasn't enough to just survive. No, I had a purpose now, a reason to get up each day, to face the future. And as I stood on the porch of the cottage one evening, watching the sunset over the rolling hills of Kentucky, I made a vow to myself. I wasn't just going to survive, I was going to make them regret ever thinking they could push me aside. The days that followed my departure from Marissa's house were the most peaceful I'd felt in years. I woke up to the chirping of birds outside my cottage, the quiet stillness of the countryside wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. It was hard to believe how quickly my world had flipped upside down. One moment, I was packing up my things. The next, I was sitting alone in the place I'd once overlooked, as if the universe had set me on a new path. But that was the thing about life. It always changed, even when you thought you were prepared for the worst. I spent the first few days at the cottage in solitude, thinking the decision to leave Marissa's home was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but it had also cleared the air. As much as I hated the circumstances, it allowed me the space to think more clearly, to piece together the puzzle of what had gone wrong. I had to be smart about this. I wasn't going to charge in, demanding explanations from Marissa or Craig. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me emotionally weak or desperate. No, that was their mistake. They thought I was fragile. They thought I would just disappear quietly, but they didn't know me. I needed information. I needed to know what was really going on in Marissa and Craig's lives. There was a reason they pushed me out. There always is. People don't just kick someone they love to the curb without a deeper motive. It was time to gather my resources, reconnect with old friends, and start digging. The first phone call I made was to Doris. Doris and I had been best friends for years before life, family, and distance pulled us apart. We'd known each other since our 20s, and though time had changed us both, I knew she'd still have my back. She'd always been the one to look out for me when I needed it most. Elsie, Doris's voice crackled through the receiver, and for a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia. It's been too long. How are you? What's been going on? I hesitated for a moment. I had to be careful about how much I revealed. Doris was a good friend, but I wasn't ready to tell her everything just yet. I couldn't risk her giving Marissa any warning. I'm all right, I said, trying to sound casual. Just settling into a new place, you know, a bit of a change. I've been thinking about things lately and, well, I could really use a friend to catch up with. She paused for a moment, and I could almost hear her thinking, piecing together my words. Of course, Elsie, you know I'm always here. You're going to tell me what's going on, aren't you? I smiled, relieved by her understanding. Not just yet, Doris, but I'll get there. For now, I need a little favor. Anything, she replied, her voice filled with concern. I need you to do some digging for me, I said carefully. I need to know everything about Marissa and Craig. I know it's a lot to ask, but I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Something's off, and I think they've been hiding things from me. There was a moment of silence before Doris spoke again. You know I've got your back, Elsie, I'll do what I can. You just be careful, all right? I thanked her and ended the call, my mind already working on the next step. Doris was just the beginning. I needed more eyes and ears. I knew the type of people. Marissa and Craig kept company with old college friends, work colleagues, a few acquaintances from their social circles. I'd been around long enough to know that nothing stays secret forever, especially when you're dealing with people who think they can get away with anything. The next few days were filled with more phone calls, emails, and discreet visits to old acquaintances. I reconnected with a few of Marissa's old friends from college, one of whom still worked as a waitress at a local cafe. I didn't give her too many details, just asked casual questions about Marissa and Craig's recent behavior. The responses were revealing. Marissa had been acting distant for months, snapping at Craig more often than usual. And there were whispers about financial troubles. But it wasn't just Marissa I was after, it was Craig, too. There was something about him that always made me uneasy. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but there was a coldness about him that didn't sit right. As I dug deeper, I discovered that Craig had recently taken out a significant loan for a business venture. It seemed harmless enough, but there was something odd about the way he'd handled it, something shady. I filed the information away for later. I wasn't quite sure how it all fit together yet, but I knew it would eventually. By the end of the week, I had a clearer picture. Marissa and Craig's marriage was under strain, but the reason for that strain was still unclear. Were they just having problems like any other couple? Or was there something darker going on beneath the surface? I couldn't let this go, not now. It was clear that they were hiding something from me, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. But I needed to be careful. I had to move slowly, like a spider weaving a web. The truth would come out, but it would come out on my terms, not theirs. As I sat in the small living room of my cottage that evening, a thought struck me. I had one more resource I hadn't tapped yet, someone who could help me get the information I needed. Someone I'd never imagined I'd turn to. It was time to call on a man from my past. A man who owed me a favor. His name was Dean, and he worked in real estate. He had always been the kind of person who knew everything about everyone. And he had a knack for digging up dirt without anyone ever knowing. We'd shared a complicated history in the past, but I knew I could count on him. If anyone could help me get the information I needed about Craig's business dealings, it was Dean. I picked up the phone and dialed his number, my heart racing. I had no idea how he would react after all these years, but I had to take the risk. "Dean," I said when he picked up, "it's Elsie. We need to talk." The days following my conversation with Dean felt like the calm before the storm. I had been carefully gathering my information, piecing together the puzzle of Marissa and Craig's hidden lives. But there was still a part of me that feared what I might find once everything came to light. I had no way of knowing how far their deception went, or how deep their secrets ran. But what I did know was that I was close. Dean was a wild card. I had reached out to him with the hope that he'd have some sort of dirt on Craig's recent business dealings. And he didn't disappoint. Dean had access to real estate records. The kind of confidential information that people like Marissa and Craig didn't think anyone could find. And when I asked, he delivered. "I got something for you, Elsie," he had said over the phone that morning. His voice low, as if he were making sure no one could overhear. "It's not much, but it'll get you started." I made my way to Dean's office later that afternoon. He was standing behind a cluttered desk, surrounded by stacks of papers and old files. The scent of coffee and cigarette smoke lingered in the air as he passed me a folder. "What I've got here is a property deed," he said, his eyes flicking to me. "But it's not just any property. It's the one Craig bought 6 months ago, under a shell company he created." I opened the folder, my heart racing. There it was, the deed to a piece of land I had never heard of before. But as I read through the details, I felt a chill run down my spine. This property wasn't just any plot of land. It was tied to a series of shady financial transactions, some of which seemed suspiciously timed to when Marissa and Craig had been asking me to leave. "Are you telling me that Craig's been hiding assets?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper as the realization hit me. Dean nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I'm saying, Elsie, and I think it's part of a bigger scheme. He's been moving money around, trying to keep it hidden from you and Marissa." This was it. This was the breakthrough I needed. But it wasn't enough yet. I had to dig deeper. I had to get concrete proof that Craig was up to something nefarious. As the days went on, I kept pressing Dean for more. He promised he'd keep looking, and I was starting to feel like my plan was finally coming together. But there was one thing I hadn't anticipated. Marissa. It started with a phone call. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping tea and thinking about my next move when the phone rang. I saw Marissa's name flash across the screen. My stomach twisted. It had been days since we'd last spoken, and I had no idea what she wanted. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I didn't see her name. But I couldn't. I answered. "Mom," Marissa said, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Can we talk? I know we've both been through a lot, but I miss you." I felt my chest tighten. The words I wanted to say were right there on the tip of my tongue. I wanted to tell her how much I had been hurt, how betrayed I felt, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not when I still needed her to play her part in my plan. I miss you too, Marissa, I said carefully, keeping my voice steady. But you need to understand something. You hurt me. You pushed me out of your home like I was nothing. I know, she whispered, and I could almost hear the tears in her voice. I'm sorry, Mom. Craig and there's so much going on, and I didn't know how to handle it, but I promise you, I never meant to hurt you. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. This was it, the moment where she'd tried to make amends, but I wasn't falling for it. Not yet. I don't know if I can forgive you right now, I said softly, but I'm willing to listen. What's really going on, Marissa? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke again, her voice was different, hesitant, almost defensive. It's not just about you, Mom, she said, her words coming out slowly. There's a lot of pressure with Craig's work, and I've been trying to hold everything together. We're not doing as well financially as I told you we were. Things aren't easy right now. I felt a pang of realization. Marissa wasn't just dealing with a troubled marriage, she was dealing with something bigger, financial troubles. And Craig's secret property was no coincidence. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice growing softer. Why didn't you ask me for help? I didn't want to burden you, she replied quickly, and I didn't want you to see how bad things really were. I thought we could handle it, but now I don't know what to do. The conversation hung in the air between us like a fragile thread. I wasn't ready to forgive her, not yet, but I knew one thing. The web I had started spinning was getting tighter, and Marissa was more involved in this mess than I had ever realized. I could use this. I could turn this situation to my advantage. Just as I was about to speak, I heard Craig's voice in the background, muffled but unmistakable. Who are you talking to, Marissa? The tension in her voice was palpable when she answered, It's Mom. I'm just before she could finish. Craig's voice cut through again, louder this time. Tell her it's too late for apologies. It's done. I froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Craig had been listening in. My heart sank. Marissa's voice faltered, but she didn't hang up. I felt the moment slip through my fingers. This wasn't going to be as easy as I thought. Craig wasn't just a bystander in their marriage, he was the one pulling the strings. And he was more dangerous than I'd realized. The days following my conversation with Marissa had left me feeling hollow. Craig's voice, that dismissive, cold tone he had used when he told Marissa to end the call, echoed in my ears, and no matter how much I tried to push it away, it was always there. Something about his words stuck to me. It's done. That phrase, so final, so cold, it made me realize that no matter how much I pushed, no matter how much I dug, they were already shutting me out. And this time, they weren't just rejecting me. They were shutting me out of their lives completely. As I sat at my small kitchen table that evening, my hands wrapped around the warm mug of tea, I couldn't help but feel the weight of my loneliness. I'd worked so hard, so methodically, to uncover their secrets, to turn the tables and make them see the consequences of their actions. But now, everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Each phone call I made, each bit of information I unearthed, only seemed to pull me deeper into a hole. My allies, like Dean, had been helpful, but they weren't enough to give me the leverage I needed. And worst of all, Marissa, my daughter, my flesh and blood, had become an enemy in her own right. I had never felt so isolated in my life. The sting of rejection wasn't just from Marissa. It was the total collapse of everything I had built, everything I believed in. They had turned my entire world upside down. The people I thought I could trust, the ones I thought would stand by me, had instead cast me aside, like a piece of discarded furniture. It felt like the end of everything, and I was left in a cold, empty room, wondering how I got here. In that moment, I wanted to give up. I wanted to crawl into bed, pull the covers over my head, and shut out the world. But then I remembered something Gary had told me years ago, before he passed. He always used to say, Elsie, the world can knock you down. Life will beat you up, but it's not over until you decide it's over. And in that moment, something sparked inside me. He was right. I wasn't done. I couldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them take everything from me. I wasn't about to let them erase me from their lives just because they thought they could. The game wasn't over. I had more tricks up my sleeve, but I needed a way to make them understand just how serious I was about this. I needed leverage, and I needed it fast. I picked up the phone and called Doris again. She had been trying to get in touch with me for a couple of days, but I had been avoiding her calls. I wasn't ready to hear the pity in her voice, or worse, have her tell me I was making things worse. But now, I needed to talk to her. I needed to know if she had found anything more about Craig's financial dealings. She was my lifeline. I couldn't do this without her. Asterisk, asterisk, when she answered, her voice was warm, but there was an edge to it. Elsie, where have you been? You've been avoiding me. I didn't sugarcoat things. I'm sorry, Doris. Things have gotten more complicated. I need your help. It's urgent. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What's going on? I explained everything the loan Craig had taken out, the shady property deal, the lies they'd been telling me. Doris was quiet as she listened, and I could hear the sound of papers rustling in the background as she made notes. I've got something. Elsie, she said after a long silence. It's not much, but it could be important. Craig, a few months ago, put a lien on your old property, the one you used to live in before moving in with Marissa. It's a small lien, but if something were to happen to that property, it could cause a big problem for him. He's been trying to sell it under the table. I felt the air leave my lungs. What do you mean, sell it under the table? Doris explained that there were legal documents related to the sale of my old house that Craig had filed. There were a series of hidden transactions, with Craig's name appearing as a beneficiary of the sale. And yet it was being kept off the public record. The lien was a safety net. Anything were to go wrong, it would protect him from any claim on the property. I sat back in my chair, feeling the enormity of the situation settle in. I had no idea what this meant for my old house, but it didn't matter. This was leverage. If I could prove Craig was hiding assets from Marissa, this could be the thing that would get their attention, and more importantly, get them to listen. But as I sat there, my heart racing with the possibility of exposing Craig, I realized something else. I couldn't trust Doris completely. There was something about her tone that made me hesitate. Was she just trying to help, or was she getting too involved? I couldn't afford to let anyone get too close. I had to do this on my own. I spent the next few days organizing everything. I made copies of the documents Doris had provided me. I scoured the online real estate databases for more hidden assets. And I wrote down every little detail I could find. But as the days went by, the weight of what I was about to do started to bear down on me. I had built this plan on the idea of exposing them, of using their secrets to turn things around. But what if it wasn't enough? What if I couldn't win? What if this whole thing was just a cruel waste of time? That doubt, that uncertainty, was enough to make me reconsider. Should I keep pushing? Or should I just let it go, walk away, and accept that they had won? The answer came to me in the form of a letter. It arrived on the 5th day, slipped under the door of the cottage. It was from a lawyer's office. The name on the envelope sent a chill through me. Craig's lawyer. I hesitated before opening it, but when I finally did, I found something unexpected inside. A notice of an impending sale of the property. The document was legally binding, and it stated that within a month, the sale of my old house would go through, with Craig named as the sole beneficiary. They were moving faster than I thought. And this was no longer just about me. This was about taking back what was rightfully mine. The moment I read the lawyer's letter, something inside me solidified. This was no longer just about getting even or making a point. This was about taking back what was mine, what I had built, and showing Marissa and Craig the consequences of their actions. They thought they could play me, that they could push me out of their lives without a second thought. But they were wrong. I was about to turn everything on its head. It had taken me a while to gather all the pieces. But now, everything was falling into place. Craig thought he was untouchable, hiding behind his financial manipulations, using legal loopholes to cover his tracks. But what he didn't know was that I had the one thing he couldn't control, the truth. The documents Doris had sent me, combined with my own research, had revealed enough to start a firestorm. The sale of my old house was only the beginning. Craig's hidden properties, his secret deals, they were all connected. All I had to do now was make sure Marissa saw it for herself. I had to show her what kind of man her husband really was. I spent the next few days gathering evidence, making sure everything was airtight. I called in favors, reached out to people who owed me, people who could confirm the lies Craig had been spinning. I even managed to get a copy of a recording from an old meeting at Craig's firm, where he discussed the hidden deals that had been kept from Marissa. It wasn't much, but it was enough to prove that he had been scheming behind her back, making financial decisions that affected both of them, and hiding it all from her. I knew I had to be careful. This wasn't just about exposing Craig's lies. It was about making sure Marissa understood everything. She had to see him for what he was. But I wasn't going to confront her directly, not yet. No, I had a better plan. I called Marissa. It was time. Her voice on the other end of the line was hesitant, as if she was still unsure whether to speak to me or not. But I didn't give her the chance to avoid the conversation. "Marissa," I said, my voice steady but firm, "I need you to listen to me, and I need you to listen carefully. I know about Craig's secret dealings. I know about the lien on the property, the business loan he's been hiding from you, the land he's been trying to sell under your nose." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, but no words came. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I could finally let her see the truth. "You don't understand, Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't know. I had no idea. Craig said everything would be fine. He said it was all under control. And that's exactly what he wanted you to believe," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "He's been lying to you, Marissa. He's been hiding things from you, taking money that should have been ours. He's using you, and you didn't even see it." Her silence was deafening. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her mind, the disbelief mixing with the shock. She didn't want to believe it, but she had to. "Where are you getting this from?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "I have the proof," I said, my tone unwavering. "I've seen the documents. I've talked to people, and I've got more than just words. I've got facts. I'm sending them to you now, Marissa. I want you to look at them. You need to see what's really going on." I hung up before she could respond. This wasn't about giving her time to protest. This was about giving her the truth, raw and unfiltered. And I knew that once she saw the evidence, once she understood just how far Craig had gone, everything would change. That evening, I sat by the phone, waiting for her call. I felt a strange sense of anticipation. This was the turning point, the moment everything would fall into place. I knew I had to be patient, but every minute that passed felt like an eternity. Finally, around midnight, the phone rang. It was Marissa. I could hear the tension in her voice, the disbelief. "Mom," she said, her words coming out in a rush. I don't know what to say. This is insane. I had no idea. I don't know how I didn't see it." "You didn't see it because Craig didn't want you to," I said softly. "He's been controlling everything, hiding it from you, making you think everything was fine while he was doing things behind your back." I can't believe this," she whispered. "All this time, I thought he was the man I married. I thought he was the one I could trust." I felt a pang of sympathy for her. She was hurt, and I knew it wasn't easy for her to face this truth. But I also knew this was the moment she had to take responsibility for her part in it. "Marissa," I said, my voice softer now, "you have to make a choice. You can either keep ignoring the truth and let him keep manipulating you, or you can stand up and take control of your own life." There was another long pause. I could hear her breathing deeply, her mind working through the storm of emotions. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "I'm done, Mom. I can't keep living in this lie. I'm going to confront him. I'm going to fix this." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. This was it. The moment everything turned around. The moment Marissa started seeing Craig for what he really was. And the moment I reclaimed my place in this family, not as a burden, but as someone who had fought for what was rightfully hers. The next few days were tense. Marissa and Craig had an explosive confrontation. There was shouting, crying, and a lot of broken trust between them. I didn't know exactly what was said, but when I heard from Marissa again, she was a different person. "Mom," she said, her voice still shaken but stronger, "I don't know what's next, but I'm not going to let him control me anymore. I'm done." The days following Marissa's declaration were tense, filled with uncertainty and anticipation. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had the upper hand. The truth had been revealed, and Marissa had made the decision to confront Craig, but the real test was yet to come. Craig's pride, his arrogance would not allow him to let this go quietly. He would try to manipulate his way out of it, to twist things in his favor. But I had prepared for that. I spent the next few days quietly watching the fallout unfold. Marissa didn't call me much after our last conversation. I could only imagine what was happening behind closed doors. But there were whispers that reached me, even here in my cottage. I heard from Doris that Marissa and Craig had been arguing It seemed like the truth had hit her like a freight train. Craig was trying to smooth things over, but Marissa was done. She couldn't look at him the same way anymore. And yet, as much as I wanted to feel satisfied, there was still a part of me that wanted to be sure. I needed proof that everything was coming apart at the seams, just as I had planned. I wasn't going to let it all rest on a few documents and some recorded conversations. I needed to ensure that Craig faced the consequences for everything he had done to me, to Marissa. He had to be exposed publicly. I needed leverage to make sure he couldn't wriggle out of this, no matter how hard he tried. I called Dean again. His voice was steady on the other end of the line when I explained what I needed. "Elsie," he said, "this is getting risky. You're asking for a lot. Are you sure you want to go this far?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I'm sure. We're not going back. We've come this far, and I'm not going to let them just walk away from this." Dean agreed to help me one last time. I knew he had his own reasons for agreeing, but I didn't care. All I cared about was making sure Craig's secrets were brought to light in front of everyone who mattered. The pressure was mounting, and Craig had no idea what was coming. The following week, I arranged a family meeting. I knew it was risky to call a meeting at this stage, especially with all the tension between us, but it was the only way. If Marissa and Craig were going to face the consequences of their actions, it needed to be done in front of witnesses, in the open. I needed to make sure they couldn't just sweep it under the rug. I told Marissa to invite a few of their close friends and a couple of mutual acquaintances. People who had been around during their relationship, who could bear witness to the changes I was about to expose. She was hesitant at first, but I convinced her. She needed to see it all, to confront the truth without Craig's manipulations clouding her judgment. The meeting was set. I arrived at Marissa and Craig's house, my heart beating faster with every step I took toward the front door. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't anxious. I was resolute. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was where everything would come to a head. When I walked into the living room, I saw Marissa sitting on the couch, her face drawn, her eyes red from crying. She looked up when I entered, and for a brief moment, I saw the pain in her expression, but also something else, something stronger. She was ready. She had made her decision. Craig, on the other hand, was standing near the window, arms crossed, staring out at the lawn. He didn't turn to face me when I entered. He didn't acknowledge me at all. Typical. "Let's get this over with," he said coldly, as if he was above all this. But I knew better. I knew he was worried. The others began to filter in friends' acquaintances. It was just the right amount of people. I knew the pressure would be on him, and he wouldn't be able to avoid the truth in front of them. "Marissa," I began, my voice firm, "we need to talk about what's been happening. What Craig's been hiding from you, from both of us." I could feel Craig's tension rise as I laid out the details. The secret property, the fraudulent deals, the loan he'd taken out without Marissa's knowledge, the lien on my old house. I held nothing back. I knew this wasn't just about getting revenge on Craig. It was about giving Marissa the truth, so she could make her own decision about her future. I looked at Marissa, her face pale but resolute. "You deserve to know the truth, sweetheart. I've been doing everything I can to uncover it. But it's not just for MIATs for you, too. You can't let him manipulate you any longer." Craig's face grew darker with each revelation. I watched him squirm, trying to find something to say, some defense. But there was nothing. The walls had come crashing down around him, and he knew it. He couldn't hide anymore. "I don't know what you think you're doing," Craig spat, his eyes burning with anger. "You're just bitter because you don't have a place here anymore. You think you can come in here and ruin everything?" I met his gaze without flinching. "You ruined everything, Craig, not me. You made your choices, and now it's time to face the consequences." There was a moment of silence, thick and heavy, before one of their friends, an older woman who had been a regular visitor at their house, spoke up. "Marissa, this is a lot to take in, but you need to understand. If he's been hiding this from you, if he's been doing this behind your back, how can you trust him again? How can you move forward?" Marissa stood up, her fists clenched, her eyes wide with disbelief and hurt. She turned to Craig, her voice shaking but strong. How could you lie to me like this?" Craig opened his mouth to defend himself, but there was no excuse left. He was cornered. "I can't believe you," she whispered, her voice breaking as tears filled her eyes. "I don't even know who you are anymore." The room fell silent. Craig stood there, exposed and defeated, while Marissa turned away, tears streaming down her face. And in that moment, I knew this was my victory. Not just over Craig, but over the years of pain, the betrayal, the lies. The truth had finally come out. And now, it was time for Craig to face the consequences. The weeks after that fateful meeting with Marissa and Craig were a blur of emotion and change. The confrontation had shaken their marriage to its core, and I could feel the shift in the air every time I spoke to Marissa. She wasn't the same person I had known before, and perhaps that was for the best. She had finally seen Craig for who he truly was. The man she had married, the man she had trusted. He was no longer the person she thought he was. And though it tore her apart, she knew she had to move forward. It wasn't easy for her, but Marissa was beginning to rebuild. The lawyers were involved, and Craig was facing the consequences of his actions. The fraudulent loans, the hidden properties, the manipulations, all of it was coming to light. Craig's arrogance had been his undoing. He thought he could control everything from behind the scenes, but when the truth surfaced, it exposed him in front of everyone who mattered. Marissa filed for divorce. The paperwork was brutal, the separation long overdue, but I could tell it was a relief for her. She was finally standing up for herself. She had made the right choice, even if it came at a high cost. I, too, was moving on. The legal battles over my old house were drawn out, but in the end, I was able to claim it back, along with the money I had lost. The lien Craig had placed on the property had been illegal, and with the evidence I gathered, I was able to settle things in my favor. It felt good, reclaiming what was rightfully mine. But it wasn't just the property, it was the sense of control. The sense that I hadn't been defeated, that I had risen above the lies and betrayal. I was no longer the woman they had pushed out. I had fought back, and in the process, I had rediscovered my own strength. And with that strength came a newfound peace. The days passed, and I found myself walking around my cottage, letting the quiet wash over me. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. I didn't need Marissa or Craig to define me. I had built my life on my own, and I would continue to do so, one step at a time. One evening, as I sat on the porch, watching the sunset over the hills, a thought occurred to me. The journey I had taken, the pain, the betrayal, it had all been part of a larger lesson. I had been so focused on what I had lost, on the people who had hurt me, that I had forgotten about the strength I had within me all along. It wasn't just about getting even. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. Marissa eventually reached out again. This time, her voice was softer, and she was no longer speaking with the defensive edge she once had. She had been through a lot, and so had I, but the difference now was that we both understood the value of honesty and trust. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I should have never let it get to this point. I should have seen what was happening, but I couldn't. I was so blinded by everything." "I know, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady but gentle, "but you're seeing it now, and that's what matters. We can't change what happened, but we can choose to move forward." We talked for a while, and though it wasn't easy, there was healing in those words. I had fought for the truth, and now I was beginning to see the results, not just in my own life, but in Marissa's as well. She was free from the chains Craig had placed on her, and I was free from the emotional burden I had carried for so long. The following weeks brought more changes. I spent more time with Doris and other old friends, reconnecting with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. I focused on my garden, something I had neglected for years, and started to rebuild the parts of my life that had been broken. Slowly but surely, I was creating a life that was truly mine, a life I didn't have to share with anyone who didn't appreciate it. And while Marissa's future was still uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. She had made the right choice. She had chosen herself, and that was the most important thing of all. As for Craig, I never heard from him again. The divorce was finalized, and he disappeared from both our lives, leaving nothing behind but the wreckage of his lies. He had thought he could control everything, but in the end, it was his own actions that led to his downfall. I had won. Not just the house, not just the money, but my freedom, the strength to live my life on my own terms, to not be pushed around by anyone ever again. It was a victory that no one could take from me. I sat on the porch one evening, looking at the setting sun, and a thought crossed my mind. Maybe it was never about getting even. Maybe it was just about finally choosing to stand tall, to be who I was meant to be. And with that, I felt a peace settle over me. The final chapter had been written. Author's note: Elsie's story is a reminder that strength and resilience often come when we least expect it. Betrayal, especially by those we love, can feel like the end, but it can also be the beginning of reclaiming our power. The story of Elsie is about the quiet justice that comes from standing up for ourselves, facing hard truths, and realizing that the greatest victory is in living life on our own terms.